You are live.
Okay, we are back at House Education Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Another bill introduction, in this case, H 180. We have the bill sponsor and with us and legislative counsel. Why don't we dive right in with the representative from Starksboro. And again, as I said to our last witness, you need not walk us through the details of the bill. We have legislative counsel here for it, but instead to kind of go over the high level parts that it offers and more importantly, the reasoning.
Exactly. I
So
appreciate
the
that.
floor is yours. Introduce yourself and we'll proceed through.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Herb Olson. I represent four wonderful towns of Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, and Starksboro in northeast Addison County, rural area. I appreciate very much being able to talk to you folks about the bill that I sponsored, H 180, an act relating to the closure of an elementary school. And I also very much appreciate, we've all been watching, the work that you folks have been doing and really appreciate it. It's what you're doing around trying to touch all the issues of, education and what needs to be changed and this sort of stuff together with raising bees. It's quite a remarkable thing to watch. And I, for one, and I think a lot of people really appreciate you're getting into really some good depth about all the little different components of the system and how to make them work better, how to make them more affordable, how to figure out how the tax system will work and all of that. I'll start out by saying something that I would say on the campaign trail that really resonated with a lot of people, which is that our children's education is the highest priority of a decent, hopeful society, right? But the concern, I think, is that we're losing, some support around that, around issues of taxes, but there are other issues as well. And that would be tragic if we did that. It'd be tragic for our students, be tragic for our society. As our Constitution said, it would also be tragic, I think, for the basic underpinnings of our democracy. So it's really important to try to get this right. I think that changes are needed in many areas of our education system. I think you folks are asking the right questions. How do we tax ourselves equitably and affordably to pay for quality education for all our students? How do we make the difficult decisions around education costs? Those are sometimes the hardest ones to really deal with. Some folks say that small community schools are part of that cost problem, right? And I think it's understandable, that's come up because so much of the focus is on costs and how can we save costs. And they also say, that some of these smaller schools aren't providing a good enough education, for the kids just because they're too small. Then you have other folks who are saying, well, geez, we want policymakers to really empathize with the type of devastation, whether it's social or economic or whatever, that they feel when, they see powerful entities, doing something, closing their school, and they don't have a say, they don't have consent. So I put together H 180 to try to be more inclusive, more equitable, a more rational way to look at this issue around small schools. It proposes the fundamentals, I think, the concept behind the bill. Beth can, talk about the details of the bill, but the concept of the bill is to have fair standards, right, and a fair process before somebody undertakes to close an elementary school. I say an entity because, right now, I think, that would be local districts. That might change, right?
School boards who close schools.
What's that?
School boards, I think, close schools.
Yeah, I'm thinking of yes, you're right. So those are the issues, though, whatever entity it is, whether school boards, as your chair said, in current situation, or whether that changes, depending on what you folks are recommending. However, the entity is identified, some good fair standards and some good a process people can trust and apply it to individual schools. Because I would submit, and I think a lot of other folks would submit, that not all schools are the same, and certainly not all small schools are the same. And if you think about enrollment thresholds, for example, I've seen a bunch of numbers tossed out. 400 students, 250, 300, whatever. If you take that sort of broad brush, I think you'd miss the mark because of because of the individual characteristics of these particular schools. I think that some of these schools, if you do a case by case kind of analysis, I think some of these schools are going to be able to show, hey, we're offering a good education to our students, and we're doing it at a reasonable cost. And so they would be able to make the case that they should stay open. They're doing a good job. And I'll concede, though, that there might be some that can't make the grade. Right? And they might be really disappointed in that ultimate decision. But I would suggest that having that process, that open, fair standards, fair process, would go, I think, optimistically, but really it would go a long way towards softening the blow for that community. So that's what I see as the value for adopting this sort of concept. There are a lot of sort of details in that concept in the bill that I think are put them in the bill. So I thought a lot of the specific standards and that process will help make it perceived as a fair thing to do. But obviously you folks are going to have a lot to say to that. And I don't make any claim to, geez, these are the only standards that are the way to go. You folks will, especially with your broader context in mind, will have a lot to say and suggest about that if you take it up. So the other thing I was thinking is that if, and I don't know where things are going, and whether you think about taking this up as a standalone or maybe more probably within the context of a much larger kind of reform bill. I think this can serve as a useful context for you folks to talk about. What do we do about small schools? What do we do about small schools? Usually in rural areas, and gives a context, I think. And maybe this isn't right in the bill. Maybe this isn't right in the bill. But trying to give you a context to have that discussion, letting other people, around the state know that you're having that kind of discussion, and really taking a look at schools, understanding that, hey, they're not all the same. So let's see. I plan for less amount of time, but if you decide to revisit this as a committee, there are folks that I've identified that I think can be useful people for you to talk to. There's a professor over at Bates College, Mara Tikan. She's a national expert on the effects of school closure. She's the author of Why Rural Schools Matter. And Professor Tikan can talk about national research on school closures, including impacts on finances, academics, social, community kinds of factors, and equity issues as well. I won't repeat. I have contact information in the document I sent along to your assistant. Certainly another one is, she's actually my constituent, Professor Jean Albert. She's the chair of the Lincoln School Board and School District. She's a very impressive person. She's been a professor of mathematics for a number of years, I think 25, 30 years, something like that. She's taught at Dartmouth. She's taught at Castleton, Middlebury. And she has some real grounded, I think, evidence around small schools, because that's what she's operating. Her district was formed after there was an effort by within the existing district to close a bunch of schools, and they took the option in Lincoln of withdrawing. And a lot of people said, you're not going to make it, too small. But I think what she has some information I think would be very helpful for you to look at, showing spending per pupil information in her district compared to the districts, in the county. And she can also sort of walk you through how she's been managed to build her budget for the next fiscal year. This is where it's all right. How are you going to put out something there?
Before we go through a list of witnesses, I just want to make sure we have enough time to ask questions.
Sure.
Do you have any further comment on the bill itself?
Well, yeah, let me just, yes, I do. Just let me list, John Castle is available, as well as a bunch of folks who've been through the mill of having their school closed. So I can make, those witnesses available. In terms of anything more about the bill, it's a good bill. I think it's a good bill. Personally, I'm the sponsor for it, and I hope you consider it, not maybe as its own, but in the context of, how do we deal with this issue, which some people are saying, is a cost issue, and try to look at it. And I guess the final thing I would say would, not all schools are the same. And, some type of an enrollment threshold, I think, would cause a lot of unnecessary harm. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And of course, I'm leaving it to Beth to walk through the bill itself.
I got a couple, and it's mostly like around what various terms mean.
Okay.
So what sort of is a competent, reasonable, and independent analysis?
Well, I think, sure.
A number of places.
Yeah. And I think that usually pertains, Mr. Chair, to financial analysis. So to me, that would mean you use someone who has some real expertise in school financing in Vermont, and be able to identify the costs of, say, a particular school. Also be able to compare those costs to alternative cost savings. I think that's a key point. If you just focus on, the cost of the school, there's a building, of course, and this person, but then, what are the alternatives? What would you have to pay in a school, that the kids would be moved to? And then also, we had an interesting example in our local district. We had the district hired a consultant, Mr. Levinson's group, actually, the K-12 solutions. Yeah. And he came in and he was very specific. He would be the type of person I would say is a very competent individual. And he identified, close the school, this amount of money, different practices, management practices within the school that would save some stuff. Central office issues, and some of those central office issues have since been put into place in the district, middle managers, that kind of thing. And frankly, he identified some significant savings around consolidating, collaborating, between the central offices of, the districts in our neighborhood, both of which are pretty small. And and the savings that could come from high school. So in answer to your question, maybe not someone, like Nate, but someone with that kind of expertise, I think would be really helpful.
And just in terms of, like, if you look at the setup of your district,
Yeah.
the schools, the small rural schools are all part of one district with one board. So who's making the case? In other words, you say, maybe that school would want to say, hey, we're pretty good. Well, who's saying that? Who's making the case? Who takes this?
Well, I think the ball would start to roll if the board tells the student, superintendent, or the superintendent suggests to the board, and then they take him up on it or her up on it, saying, we got to close the school. Right. So I think it would start with that. And at least the way it worked out in our district, Mr. Chair, then the administration of the district tried to assemble a case for why this is a good idea to close the school. So that's the way it worked out in our area, and maybe there's some other ways it would work. And ultimately, they hired, Mr. Levinson.
Yeah, in introducing the bill, you said, well, maybe the school would want to say, hey, we're a pretty good school. Maybe you should keep us around. I don't know. A school doesn't speak for itself.
No, but I think that's so the requirements, if you will, on the court call for certain things to be talked about. And a lot of them are whether or not kind of issues, identifying the issues and what is it there. And then they would need to come to a conclusion that the educational factors, the financial factors, weigh in favor of closing school. When I say that give people a chance to make the case that it's a good school, I think that is the public process part that would go along there. There's certain pieces in the bill that say, give the community some notice before you start this, or that you're thinking about this process, and allow them to think about it too. And they're not experts, right? But at least you give them an opportunity to weigh in on the process. Maybe have a bunch of hearings that the administration or the administration's consultant, provide some data, some analysis. And these community members, they might have, some of them actually are very, very well-informed school finance. But even if they're not, I think it's really important to give the community a meaningful voice in that process. I think that's the value. And so when I'm talking about, show we're a good school, right? I think that's sort of inherent in the process. You give people an opportunity to show they're a good school and financially be useful. They might not make their case. I can see that. But that's the point I was trying to suggest there.
Around the table, other questions? Great. Well, we'll have Ledge Council walk through with us. You're welcome to stay, or if you've got pressing needs back at your own committee, you're welcome to.
I have gained an absence slip from my chair, so I'm okay. Thank you very much for it.
Appreciate it. And I think,
I really, really appreciate it.
there's no question that this is a challenging topic. It's sort of the greater breadth of ideas that we have, better. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and there was something in my script that I didn't mention. I really stand ready to help you in terms of trying to navigate it. It's not an easy issue, I understand. I know a lot of folks, out there, and I hope that I hope that together and a lot of folks out there can really help you grapple with the issue, because it has to be dealt. Thank you very much.
All right, we will walk through now.
Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. Would you like me to share my screen?
Yes. I realize, Andy, that's a departure from our usual practice from last year, but for those watching at home, it seems to be better to have it.
So we're gonna walk
Choose
through,
that. Yeah, please.
we're gonna walk through H 180 as introduced in an act relating to the closure of an elementary school. This is kind of there's a lot of concepts in here, so I am gonna walk through more closely line by line than I think we all find stimulating, but I think it's important for the concepts in this bill. So section 1 starts with a legislative intent section, which includes the following points. It is the intent of the General Assembly that communities and their community elementary schools should be afforded due process on a case-by-case basis before an elementary school is closed. Elementary schools are not all the same. Before closing an elementary school, the community, including students, parents, community members, and teachers, should have a meaningful voice.
Could I stop right there? Community is not really a term that we often use in legislation. Does it defined anywhere below?
No. The educational benefits of the school for students should be carefully considered, especially for at-risk students from historically marginalized groups, students from households with low income, and ethnically or linguistically diverse households. The financial savings associated with closing the school should be objectively analyzed based on credible data, and those financial savings should be measured against all other reasonable voting options. Remember, that's legislative intent. So I'm on page 2, section 2. This bill proposes to add a section to chapter 11 of title 16, which is the Union School District chapter. The section is entitled section 726, closing an elementary school, and it starts with some definitions. Close an elementary school is defined as meaning ceasing to provide educational instruction to all students in the elementary school or to any subset of grades as they exist as of the date of the proposal to close the elementary school. And then the term elementary school is defined as an educational facility for the instruction of students in any configuration of grades pre-kindergarten through grade 8. Elementary school includes an elementary school governed by a union school district and by any other school district governed by an entity that has the authority to close an elementary school without the agreement or consent of the school district or votes of the town or other locality wherein the elementary school is located.
Just in terms of grade bands, is that your current statute?
Bear with me 1 second.
I never remember quite where middle school grades fall. 6 to 8.
I believe
It
it's
varies,
K
yeah.
through 6 is elementary school.
Right.
So bear with me 1 second. I'm starting to think I should just keep my green book in this room. Elementary education is pre-K, K, and the first 6 grades, so 1 through 6. So this definition is it's specific to this section already, but it does differ from the general definition of elementary. Elementary, so I'm on page 3. Elementary school does not include an elementary school governed by a school district that is exclusively responsible for that elementary school. I believe that is meant for Union Elementary School District.
So this whole section, I know it might be it might conflict with some other definitions that might be used for a different purpose. It's trying to reflect what I understand to be quite the variety of districts that operate elementary schools. So yes, I think that's part of it. It also, I'm aware of at least one, and there might be more districts that the only thing they do is operate that elementary school. And so the reasoning behind excluding them is that you don't have those issues of, some other entity saying you gotta close that school because they're their own entity. So there may be lots of different better ways to do that. I'm just trying to encompass all the situations around our wonderful state where we have such a variety of districts.
Thank you. Page 3, line 4, subsection B, closure report. So before closing an elementary school, the school district is required under this section to provide public notice of its intent to close the elementary school at least 9 months before issuing its elementary school closure report, and publish an elementary school closure report not later than 90 days before making a final decision. The district is required to provide students, families, community members, teachers, and others a meaningful opportunity to consider and offer comments concerning the report and to file objections to the conclusions reached in the report. Notwithstanding 1 VSA section 3, subsection 316C and D, the district shall respond promptly without charge to reasonable requests for the then existing data and assumptions on which the report is based. Section 1 VSA sections 316, subsections 316C and D are part of the Public Records Act and refer to reasonable charges that can be tacked onto a public records request. And so this is notwithstanding that because it's requiring school districts to make this information available without charge. The report is required to demonstrate based on credible data and based on competent, reasonable, and independent analysis of the educational impacts on students, whether student proficiency scores, social emotional health, and other measures of student outcomes will improve as a result of closure. And whether students from historically marginalized households with marginalized demographics, including students from households with low income and students from ethnically and linguistically diverse households, will not experience adverse educational outcomes from moving from a local elementary school to a larger school located outside the community. I'm on page 4 now. The report shall demonstrate based on credible data and based on competent, reasonable, and independent financial analysis whether a reasonable and credible amount has been ascribed to the financial savings that can be attributed to closing the elementary school. Financial savings options have been considered as alternatives to closing the elementary school, and those alternative financial savings in the aggregate are less than the amount credibly ascribed to closing the elementary school. Consideration of alternative financial savings shall include the most cost-effective number of central office staff, facility-based administrative staff, and other staff not engaged in direct education to students. Whether collaboration between or consolidation of central office administrative and management personnel and functions in neighboring or regional school districts can reduce administrative costs after determining the reasonable amount associated with such collaboration or consolidation. Whether collaboration between neighboring or regional high schools and technical centers can reduce costs after determining the reasonable amount associated with such collaboration, and any other alternative financial savings. The report shall provide credible and reasonable information on student transport. The student transport portion of the report shall include the standard used by the district to measure whether transport times for students are reasonable, as well as information specifying the time students will spend being transported from their individual home to a new school and back again. The report shall determine whether those transport times are reasonable and feasible after considering geographic locations, typical road conditions and inclement weather, the age and grade level of students, factors affecting students with special needs, and any other relevant consideration. Times specified shall be specific to each drop-off or pickup location rather than average transport times. State standards relating to transport times for different grade cohorts shall be included in the report, but such standards are not determinative on whether proposed transport times are reasonable and feasible.
Hang on a second here. State standards relating to transport times. Do those exist?
I have not been able to locate them. It does not mean that they don't exist.
Never heard of one.
If an elementary school is closed, families of students whose transport times are not reasonable or feasible may attend a public elementary school outside the district at the tuition expense of the original district. The report shall describe for students, parents, and community what happens next for the education of students after the school closes, including a reasonable plan for the use of the school building after it is closed, whether or not the municipality chooses to accept ownership of the building. On page 6.
That would, I assume that last sentence would sort of require a school district to come up with a plan for use of the building after it is closed, whether they continue to own it or not.
Correct.
I just said the same thing that was there. Sorry. Continue.
I think it also is meant to get at the fact that the plan should be, the plan doesn't necessarily have, there has to be a plan even regardless of not only whether the school district continues to own the building, but whether the town that the school building itself is located within chooses to accept ownership of the building. So two different municipalities.
That would then say that if the town where the school building is located would like to retain ownership, the school district is coming up with a plan for it.
I believe this is saying, so the school district owns the building. The building is located not just in a school district, but in a separate municipality, the town, for the sake of this conversation. So I read this section as saying the report has to describe the plan if a school closes for use of that building, regardless of who owns it. I think the basic way of putting it. The report shall demonstrate based on credible data and on competent, reasonable, and independent analysis of educational and financial considerations, whether the educational and financial benefits from closing the elementary school outweigh the negative impacts from closing the elementary school on the demographic and economic viability and vitality of the town the school is located within and the community. And closing the elementary school will have a material impact on reducing education property tax rates in the district.
Can I just back to this word community? It says the economic viability and vitality of the town the school is located within and the community.
The term community is not defined here. I am on page 6, line 10, subsection C, closure decision. After the conclusion of the report process established in subsection B, which is what we just walked through, the district shall make a decision as to whether closing the elementary school is just, reasonable, and supported by the evidence, improve student outcomes, and will promote the general good of the state. If the foregoing question is answered by the district in the affirmative, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, in the case of a district in which the articles of agreement require the affirmative vote of the town in which the elementary school is located before the school is closed, there shall be a vote of the town in which the elementary school is located, whether an affirmative vote is required by reason of the text of the warned consolidation article or required otherwise in the text of the articles of agreement. So there has to be a vote. On page 7, in such cases, the district shall not close the elementary school in the absence of an affirmative vote of the town. In the case of articles of agreement that do not require the affirmative vote of the town in which the elementary school is located before the school is closed, the town, at the discretion of the select board, may hold an advisory vote on school closure. The district's decision, together with its report as amended by the district as warranted, and the town's advisory vote, if conducted, shall be transmitted to the Board of Education for a decision on whether to close the elementary school. The board's decision shall be made after notice and an opportunity to be heard. Party status shall be granted to the select board of the municipality within which the school is located, and to any 20 registered voters of the municipality within which the school is located, acting in concert who so request party status.
Party status, a thing? Understood something like this?
It is if you make it. So for any adversarial process, adversarial implies there's more than one party, right? Because there's adverse interests. So this is a new process that the law is creating, and so you would decide who gets to have a seat at the table. The board shall not issue a decision to close an elementary school unless the board determines, after administrative hearing pursuant to 3 VSA Chapter 25, which is the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, based on a preponderance of the evidence. Preponderance just means more likely than not, that the district's decision is adequately supported by the law and by the facts included in the district's decision and report, by any other evidence or argument offered by the parties at the board's administrative hearing. The town's advisory vote on opposition to school closure should not be accorded deference, and the reasons therefore. And the district's decision is just, reasonable, and supported by the evidence. Improved student outcomes will have a material impact on reducing education property tax rates in other school districts in the state, and is in furtherance of the public good. The decision of the board to close an elementary school may be appealed to the Washington County Superior Court. The Superior Court shall hear the appeal de novo on the record transmitted by the Board of Education. The decision of a school district to close an elementary school and a decision of the board to uphold the district's decision shall not be given administrative deference by the Superior Court in a proceeding challenging the validity of such decisions. A decision by the board to keep an elementary school open shall not be subject to appeal.
Just language again. Line 10, the decision of a school district to close an elementary school and a decision of the board to uphold the district's decision. What does district mean in this case?
The school district. So if a school district decides to close an elementary school,
But that's the board.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. No. Or if the school district decides to close an elementary school and someone appeals that decision, and then the State Board of Education,
In this case, we're saying, okay.
yep, so there's two different boards. There's the
Got it.
school board and the
Yep,
state
okay,
board.
okay.
Are we clear?
Yep.
Okay. So the only decision that is subject to an appeal is closing a school. If a decision is made by the State Board of Education to keep an elementary school open, that decision is not appealable. And the effective date of this act would be July 1, 2025.
Just for clarity, thank you. I'm on page 7, line 8, where it says the Board of Education. Whenever it says the Board of Education like that, you're talking about the State Board of Education.
Yes, State Board is
Throughout.
capitalized.
Thank
Yes.
you. Just wanted to make sure it was clarity.
Earlier.
And can I actually ask one more? Quite a few times, the language in here says just, reasonable, and supported by evidence. Supported by evidence I get, except we'll leave that aside, but just and reasonable feels very subjective. Who determines reasonable? The decision?
I think
of
it
the
depends on which
district?
part of the process you are in and who has the decision-making power at that time.
Okay.
And then ultimately, if there's a set of
Okay.
appeals, it would be the court that's making the
Thank you.
I'm just curious, today, if a school district, a union school district board decides to close one of its elementary schools, is that appealable to the court system?
depends on the process that is followed.
But a group of citizens could potentially, I guess it would require us to be sued. And a parent-
Anyone can sue anyone for
I was gonna say
anything.
before yours.
It depends. The charter or the articles of incorporation or the articles of agreement, the governing documents of each school district spell out different processes for who holds the decision-making power in closing a school and the process that decision maker is required to undergo. Some of that is dependent on the articles of agreement themselves. Some of that is dependent on what was warned in the public vote to form a union school district. Like there's many layers there. And so depending on what happens, it's possible that someone could have standing to challenge that action. There's also a whole host of other options or possibilities related to governmental action or even constitutional concerns if that leads to some sort of, someone might have a common benefits clause or an education clause claim. It may not go anywhere, but there's all different kinds of ways I could see a colorable argument to challenge that decision in a court of law. Whether it would be effective or not, I don't know.
Anybody else? Great. Thank you all very much. Why don't we take 5 minutes and we'll reset and